We do not stand still and are developing for you, so we bring to your attention a new voice and a new story.
You must depart from this meeting, Amanda. My uncle's voice sliced through the boardroom like a blade. 20 sets of eyes turned towards me, some filled with sympathy, others deliberately avoiding mine. He didn't lower his voice as he spoke further. These discussions are for vital staff members only. As the company's leading operations director for 3 years, I was once considered vital. Now, it seemed, I wasn't. I looked down at the financial reports tightly held in my hands, the ones that showed Hartwell Industries' real predicament, the ones I had spent countless hours perfecting, the ones containing a restructuring plan that could potentially save our family business. However, Uncle Richard, I have completed the quarterly report, so there's no need for it, he interrupted, his smile not touching his eyes. We already have enough people present. Perhaps you could fetch us some coffee while you wait? Fetch them coffee. As an intern rather than the individual credited with doubling manufacturing efficiency in the past year, I found myself in this situation. In stark contrast, my classmate from Wharton, Uncle Richard's kin, who barely managed to survive community college, was bestowed a vice presidency title. My face flushed with anger as I collected my materials with a steady hand. My head held high and back straight, I approached the door, acutely aware of their watchful gazes. Not a word was spoken, not even by Martin, my father's oldest friend, who was well aware of the effort I'd put in, nor by Kate, my cousin, who had expressed her eagerness for my presentation just yesterday. As the heavy door closed, I took a deep, trembling breath before adjusting my blazer and shouldering the weight of their ignorance. Unbeknownst to them, I was the one propping up Hartwell Industries. Unaware that Amanda Hartwell was the quiet investor, Monarch Investments contributing $8 million to the firm over the past year, they were on the brink of discovering the consequences of biting the hand that fed them. Before we continue, let's find out where you're joining us from. If this tale resonates with you, remember to subscribe, as tomorrow I have a unique treat in store for you. It never crossed my mind that I would covertly fund my own family business. As a child, Hartwell Industries was portrayed as an invincible entity. My grandfather constructed it from scratch, turning a modest metal fabrication workshop in Cleveland into a dominant regional manufacturing entity. The "Hartwells don't give up and Hartwells don't fail" phrase was like our family mantra, echoed at every festive gathering and company event. I, too, held this conviction, spending my summer vacations on the factory floor as a high school student, immersing myself in every facet of the business. Unlike my cousins who grumbled about the heat and noise, I found joy in observing raw materials morph into precision parts. There was an enchanting quality to the process, disorder turning into order through human ingenuity and tenacity. My grandfather recognized my fascination, mentoring me in a way he hadn't with my cousins. "You got the Hartwell eye," he'd say. "You understand the system holistically, not just its components." 5 years ago, when he passed away, I was halfway through my MBA, driven to modernize Hartwell Industries. The company had solid foundations, but its systems were outdated, technology lagging behind competitors. I had elaborate strategies for optimizing operations while maintaining the craftsmanship that bolstered our esteem. Upon reading the will, authority shifted to my father and Uncle Richard, both becoming equal partners. My reserved, contemplative brother focused on product development and manufacturing quality, while Uncle Richard handled sales, marketing, and finance, quickly ascending to CEO position. Initially, operations ran smoothly. I completed my studies and joined as Director of Operations, reporting to my father. His suggestions were implemented, operations improved, and we secured significant contracts. During client meetings, Uncle Richard often claimed credit for these successes, yet I didn't object as outcomes held greater importance than recognition. Regrettably, my father suffered a stroke, fortunately not fatal, but incapacitating him from work. His shares in the company remained unchanged, but his voting rights were temporarily delegated to Uncle Richard during recovery. This unexpected shift in power dynamics significantly altered the equilibrium at Hartwell Industries. In just a few weeks, Uncle Richard elevated his son Jeremy to the role of Vice President of Business Development, a novel position for which he held no suitable qualifications. My budget proposals were either rejected or delayed. My emails remained unanswered. Decisions were made without my consultation, leading to the gradual financial drainage of the company. Initially, it was minor: some risky investments, an unwarranted office renovation, a line of luxury corporate cars. By the time I gained insight into the entire financial situation, Hartwell Industries was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, 6 months away from collapse. My father was slowly recovering. His speech had improved, but his cognitive abilities were still compromised. I couldn't share this burden with him. Instead, I devised a singular strategy. Using my grandfather's inheritance and the trust he had placed in my Hartwell acumen, I established Monarch Investments and approached Uncle Richard under the guise of an anonymous benefactor. The irony was nearly unbearable. Rich Uncle Richard proudly told everyone about how his business intuition had enticed this enigmatic benefactor. Simultaneously, I was in the shadows, executing assessments to pinpoint where the financial hemorrhaging was most severe and how it could be halted. For a year, this setup proved effective. My funds maintained the company's solvency while I attempted to steer decisions from within. However, Uncle Richard became progressively reluctant to adopt my operational proposals, increasingly indifferent to my worries, leading me to today's board meeting, one I had meticulously prepared for weeks to present my extensive restructuring blueprint, only to be dismissed as if an inconvenient intern. I remained seated at my desk, gazing at the family photograph from more joyous days that I kept beside my computer. My grandfather was positioned centrally, with his arms around my father and Uncle Richard, the factory looming behind them. Built something substantial, providing jobs to 300 people, enduring both economic recessions and technological changes. I wasn't going to let Uncle Richard's arrogance jeopardize it. My phone vibrated, displaying a text from Kate. That was dreadful. What could my father possibly be thinking? I chose not to respond. Instead, I turned on my laptop and opened a folder titled Contingency Plan. Created 3 months back during my first suspicion of Uncle Richard's exclusion from vital meetings, it initially seemed paranoid. Now it seemed prophetic. The plan was straightforward, yet meticulous. As Monarch Investments, I had designed my financial aid as convertible notes with stipulated performance conditions. Conditions that, based on the latest quarterly figures I'd just reviewed, Hartwell Industries had not met for 2 consecutive quarters, one more quarter of underperformance, and I could transform those notes into controlling equity. I phoned my college roommate, Sophia Bennett, a thriving corporate attorney who handles family business conflicts, using my desk phone. Her assistant replied, Sophia Bennett's office. I identified myself as Amanda Hartwell for Sophia and stated it was urgent. After a brief pause, Sophia spoke warmly. She asked about Hartwell Industries, to which I responded by proposing lunch due to a matter needing her assistance. 2 hours passed, and we were at a secluded table in Vincenzo's, an intimate Italian eatery known for its confidentiality. I'd already disclosed the circumstances regarding Monarch Investments and the conditions of the convertible notes. Sophia queried, I see clearly, she twirled pasta with her fork. You've been covertly funding your family company for a year, without them being aware? I clarified, my uncle is unaware, but my cousin Kate may have suspicions. She's intelligent and careful, yet she hasn't directly inquired, nor have I disclosed it to her. Now, you wonder if you can assume control. I gave a nod of agreement. The company is likely to miss its targets once more this quarter, which would activate the conversion clause. However, I need to verify if there are any legal risks I'm overlooking. Uncle Richard won't give up easily. Sophia set down her cutlery and looked straight at me. The contracts are sound. The essential concern is whether you're ready for the aftermath. Family businesses are already complex enough without secrets and hostile acquisitions. It's not a hostile takeover. If I prevent the company from going bankrupt, I countered, it might appear hostile to your uncle, Sophia retorted, and potentially to other family members. Are you ready to handle the repercussions? I gazed into my water glass, watching the ice cubes gradually dissolve. Am I prepared? The conflict would be brutal. Relationships could be irrevocably harmed. For the upcoming family gatherings, an uncomfortable atmosphere seemed inevitable. However, letting my grandfather's inheritance deteriorate due to ego and poor administration was not an option. I'm ready, I admitted, looking into Sophia's eyes. What steps should I take next? Upon returning to the office, I maintained my usual schedule. I attended meetings as they came and completed tasks with my customary dedication. Even when Jeremy walked past me in the corridor, I offered a polite smile. As it took considerable effort to write and narrate this story, your subscription to our channel would be greatly appreciated. Now, back to the narrative. Boasting about a deal he claimed to have closed on his phone, yet secretly planning beneath this composed demeanor. I had been quietly gathering information. In private conversations with key managers, I inquired about their apprehensions and grievances. I recorded operational decisions that went against my advice. I gathered proof of financial misconduct that appears undeniable. Significantly, I spoke with Frank Coleman, a longtime employee and my father's oldest associate at Hartwell Industries. With 3 decades under his belt at the company, Frank is widely admired throughout the organization. Inquiring about whether I was unjustifiably alarmed, I divulged the circumstances to him while asking for confidentiality. We conversed, not in our workplace, but rather in his humble residence, ensuring privacy. Am I perceiving issues that don't truly exist due to my resentment over being marginalized? I asked Frank, as I observed his familiar gesture of considering a complex problem. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. You are not unjustifiably alarmed, he eventually responded. The company is struggling and the situation is deteriorating. Richard is making promises to clients that we cannot fulfill with our existing capacity. He's sacrificing quality in materials to boost profits. Morale is at an all-time low. You haven't spoken up about it. To whom did you intend to speak? Richard disregards engineering concerns, your father is still recovering, and you. I assumed you were aware and opting out of fights that couldn't be won. The materials issue is critical. It impacts our quality and our reputation. Yes, I'm aware. I've compiled all the details. I was planning to present this to your father, but maybe it's better for you to handle it. I took the thick folder, feeling its weight. Why haven't you left, Frank? With your experience, you could work anywhere. He looked at family photos on his mantle, his children and grandchildren smiling in various settings. His company had paid for their education. My grandson's medical bills were covered by our insurance plan, something many others would have denied. Amanda, your grandfather didn't just build a business. He built a community. When his eyes met mine, there was a fire in them. A quiet resolve that spoke louder than words. That's something worth defending. Leaving Frank's house, I felt strangely renewed. A deeper understanding had settled in. This wasn't about pride or preserving a family name. It was about the people who depended on us. 300 employees and their families, loyal clients who trusted our supplies, and a legacy of 70 years grounded in excellence and integrity. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, hoping for a few quiet minutes to collect my thoughts before the charade of the day began. But to my surprise, Brenda, Uncle Richard's assistant, was already waiting outside my door. She looked uncomfortable. Mr. Hartwell would like to see you in his office, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Now? I asked, glancing at the time. It was just past 7 in the morning. She responded. He was very precise, already starting to depart. I trailed after her towards the executive suite, feelings of curiosity and caution intertwined. Uncle Richard seldom showed up before 9 a.m. and rarely sought morning meetings. Something was amiss. He stood by his window as I entered, gazing down at the factory below. In stark contrast to my modest office filled with practical furnishings and work-related documents, his was designed to inspire awe. Luxurious art, custom-made furniture, and a desk that could accommodate a small plane. Amanda, he began without looking at me. Thank you for arriving so promptly. You needed to see me? Now he turned, scrutinizing me with an expression I couldn't quite understand. An intriguing email from Monarch Investments had arrived in my inbox last night, expressing their worries about our quarterly figures. I maintained a neutral facial expression. I hadn't sent any such email. That's not unexpected, I replied cautiously. The figures aren't favorable. He acknowledged this, catching me off guard with his frankness. Consequently, Monarch is sending a delegate to our executive committee meeting on Thursday. They seek a comprehensive explanation of our financial status and our ensuing strategy. My thoughts whirled. I hadn't anticipated this move. It seemed someone else was utilizing Monarch's name. I understand, I replied, purchasing time. And how might I assist with that? Nephew Richard? He sighed heavily, ruffling his silver hair. I require the quarterly operations report from you now, the one you were to present yesterday. The one deemed unnecessary for non-essential personnel? My voice took an edge. He admitted having been under immense pressure. Yesterday was indeed so. The board has queries I find challenging to answer. Regarding the new product line, I inquired innocently, well aware that Jeremy's project was already months delayed and exceeding its budget by millions. He sank into his leather chair with a weight, stating, "It's crucial that we show unity to Monarch on Thursday. They're our lifeline, and if they withdraw funding..." His sentence trailed off, but the gravity of the situation lingered. I allowed myself a brief moment of triumph before responding professionally. I'll revise my presentation with the current figures. Any additional tasks for me? He requested. Just your discretion. The meeting details are confidential. Only the executive committee and required speakers should know. He underlined the word required subtly to drive home his point. Yesterday I was unnecessary, today I am essential. I acknowledged with an easy nod. Is that all? He waved me off carelessly, already grabbing for his phone. It seemed he considered the crisis resolved in his thoughts. As I returned to my office, my mind raced. A counterfeiter was mimicking Monarch Investments. The query was who and why. My phone vibrated as I neared my desk. A text from an unknown number. Meeting for coffee at Westfield Plaza in 30 minutes about our shared investment. I scrutinized the message before replying, "Who is this?" The reply swiftly followed. An individual acquainted with your monarch. An individual offering assistance. Within 28 minutes, I found myself seated at an outdoor table at the Westfield Plaza coffee shop, a location carefully selected for its proximity to Hartwell Industries. Arriving early allowed me to secure a secluded table and scrutinize any approaching individuals. "Are you Ms. Hartwell?" A woman of similar age and professional attire approached me, clutching an iPad. Her poise and assertive gaze suggested a person accustomed to managing situations. "I'm Vanessa Liu," she added, offering her hand. "Senior analyst at Redwood Capital." I extended my hand instinctively as my mind raced, Redwood Capital being one of the largest private equity firms in the Midwest. "You emailed my uncle," I stated, the puzzle pieces fitting together, pretending to be from Monarch Investments. She smiled, settling opposite me. "Can I? Without?" Anticipating her response, she placed her iPad on the table. "Yes, I did send that email. I was trying to establish a transparent situation without revealing your position." "How did you know it was from my monarch?" She casually shrugged. "It required some sleuthing. Money always leaves a trace, even when the path is purposely hidden. But that's not relevant. What matters is what happens next." I examined her, trying to discern her motives. "And what does Redwood Capital intend to happen next?" "We wish to acquire Hartwell Industries." She spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "The company has substantial untapped potential, valuable patents, and a talented workforce. What it lacks is competent leadership and sufficient funding." "It's not for sale," I responded reflexively. "Everything can be bought at the right cost," she retorted, "and currently, Hartwell's value is decreasing under your uncle's management." I found it hard to dispute her analysis, but her assurance gave me unease. "Why aren't you approaching my uncle instead?" "Because you possess the power." She indicated her iPad, displaying a document. "As Monarch Investments, you hold convertible notes that could give you control over the company. Your conversion terms are triggered after 3 consecutive quarters of missed targets." She glanced up at me. "This is the 3rd quarter." She seemed to know more than she should have. "What specifically are you suggesting?" I asked calmly. "An alliance," she replied, pushing the iPad towards me. "Redwood will supply the capital required to revitalize and expand Hartwell Industries. You continue as CEO with control. Your uncle and cousin receive substantial severance deals to depart amicably." Looking over the proposal on the screen, I noted its impressive figures. "But if uninterested?" Vanessa took back her iPad, maintaining a pleasant expression but with eyes subtly hardening. "Then we go straight to your uncle with an offer, one he's likely to accept given the company's financial state," she suggested. "You'd retain your shareholding, certainly, yet influence would lessen markedly." It was a polite threat, but it also hinted at something significant. Redwood wasn't sure of my uncle's full understanding of the company's actual financial situation. They required an insider, someone adept at managing family dynamics. They needed me. "I need time to ponder this," I responded, rising. "And I want to review the complete proposal, not just the summary." "Understood," she handed me a business card. "I'll send you the comprehensive documentation via email. Need a response prior to our meeting on Thursday." Upon receiving the card, I nodded slightly and departed, already mulling over this fresh predicament in my mind, assessing its impact on my available choices. Once settled in my vehicle, a brief pause ensued before the engine sprung to life. Redwood's attention represented both a challenge and a chance. Their resources could potentially propel Hartwell Industries past existing boundaries. However, private equity firms often lack a patient, employee-centric approach to business operations. Frank's words reverberated within my thoughts. Your grandfather didn't just establish a business, he cultivated a community. Would this community persist under Redwood's stewardship? Will the Hartwell families, who have been with us for generations, still have jobs in 5 years? In 2? Having made up my mind, I ignited the engine and drove off. No sale to Redwood was in the cards. Yet their interest could serve as a catalyst for my own agenda. a means to expedite my plans. By the time I reached the office, I had sketched out my game plan. Initially, it was crucial to ascertain who was aware of the details concerning Monarch investments, as there was a possibility that Vanessa Liu had discovered my identity. I utilized the afternoon for updating my presentation while simultaneously scrutinizing all correspondence related to Monarch, examining security measures, and identifying potential data leaks. By 6:30 p.m., majority of the office staff had left. I was still engrossed in finalizing details at my desk when Kate emerged at my doorway. "Still working?" she inquired, standing casually by the door. Unlike her brother Jeremy, Kate merited her role as marketing director due to talent and effort. "Almost done," I replied, saving my documents. "And you?" "Escaping household chores," she confessed with a wry grin. "Mom's on another health craze. Dinner will be kale and disillusionment." My laughter was involuntary. Aunt Patricia's periodic wellness manias were legendary family jokes. Kate entered my office, shutting the door after her. Regarding yesterday's meeting, I cut in before she could finish, not seeking pity. "It's all right," I said, but she persisted, sitting down opposite my desk. It was a humiliating and foolish situation. My father has been making questionable decisions lately, yet no one dares to challenge him. I observed Kate, seeing genuine worry in her features. "Everyone?" I queried. "Including me?" She looked sheepish. I should have spoken up. I was speechless. "It's a complex matter," I admitted. "He is your father. And the company's CEO," she pointed out. "But that doesn't make him correct." She leaned closer, whispering, "Something odd is happening." "It appears so. My father has been secluded in his office all afternoon, making calls. Brenda hinted at Monarch Investments sending a representative on Thursday. I kept my face impassive. "I'm aware of that." "What do you know about Monarch?" she inquired further. "You implied Dad acts as if they're benefactors, but he seems oddly secretive about the specifics of their investment." This gave me a chance to judge Kate's knowledge or suspicions. "I do know they've contributed substantial funds during the past year," I replied. "However, the particulars haven't been disclosed to me." Kate looked displeased with my response. "Aren't you finding this peculiar? This enigmatic investor appears just when we require them most, requires little monitoring, and now demands full transparency." She paused, scrutinizing my face, as if someone behind the scenes was pulling the strings. My heart pounded, but I maintained a composed expression. "That's quite a conjecture." "Is it?" She tilted her head, keeping her gaze fixed on mine. "Because I've been examining the timing of these investments, and they coincide perfectly with certain operational emergencies. Emergencies that you recognized weeks before anyone else did." I remained quiet, neither admitting nor denying. After a brief pause, Kate offered a gentle smile and said, "It's all right. I'll keep your secret." Rising from her seat, she adjusted the strap of her handbag. "I want you to be aware that whatever you are plotting, I stand with you. The condition our company is in necessitates immediate action." Prior to exiting, she glanced over her shoulder and added, "Please, try to recall he's not a wicked man. He's merely terrified and reacting impulsively. Living under Grandpa's shadow can be challenging." Upon departing, I remained seated in the dimly lit office, pondering her remarks. Uncle Richard wasn't an antagonist from a film, scheming with a mustache twirl. He was a man struggling to meet his father's legend, making hasty decisions born out of insecurity rather than ill will. Though his actions couldn't be justified or lessened, they did remind me that this predicament was about saving the company, not penalizing my uncle. The following morning, I got an email from Vanessa Liu delivering Redwood Capital's comprehensive acquisition offer, as anticipated. The figures were more alluring than the sneak peek she'd shared, encompassing incentives for essential workers and a lucrative remuneration package for me should I execute the deal. It was enticing. I could depart with wealth, relieved of family business turmoil, ready to begin anew. However, as I perused the document, the warning signs emerged. Hidden within the legalese were provisions about operational restructuring and efficiency optimization, synonyms for downsizing and outsourcing in corporate speak. The community my grandfather had nurtured would be demolished within 18 months if this went through. I forwarded the proposal to Sophia for a legal evaluation, then focused on preparing for our meeting on Thursday. If I were to unveil Monarch Investments, everything had to be flawless. The Thursday morning unfolded with an air of predictability. My sleep had been restless, my thoughts whirling through potential outcomes and backup strategies until the wee hours. Upon reaching Hartwell Industries, the parking lot was adorned with luxury cars I wasn't familiar with. signifying the arrival of Redwood Capital's team. As I walked to the executive conference room, where I'd been abruptly dismissed a few days back, I observed Uncle Richard gesticulating energetically to a group of suit-clad individuals. Among them was Vanessa Liu, maintaining a composed countenance as she nodded attentively during his discourse. Gathering my composure, I straightened my blazer and stepped into the room. "Ah, Amanda!" Uncle Richard's voice boomed. His smile stretched wide, clear indicators of his unease. Timely, indeed. I was just detailing our operational efficiencies to the Redwood delegation. A hint of inquiry flashed in Vanessa's eyes. I didn't disclose anything, offering a polite nod to the gathered individuals. "Miss Hartwell?" Vanessa said, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you formally. Your reputation precedes you." "Is that so?" I responded, gripping her hand firmly. "Your operational advancements have been quite noteworthy," she went on smoothly. "Our assessment indicates Hartwell Industries' manufacturing efficiency has increased by 32% since your arrival on the executive team." Uncle Richard's smile momentarily faltered. This wasn't the first time someone had linked company improvements to me instead of him, and it never ceased to grate on his nerves. "Amanda has indeed made a difference," he interjected promptly. "However, let's proceed. The formal presentation? Our schedule is quite packed." The following hour was a meticulously planned ballet. Uncle Richard delivered an optimistic synopsis of Hartwell Industries' market standing and future possibilities, skirting around financial concerns with practiced ambiguity. Jeremy proceeded with an extended discussion on his new product development, stating, "Idea, embellished with attractive visuals yet lacking tangible performance data." Then it was my turn to speak. "Thank you, Jeremy," I responded, connecting my laptop to the projector. "I'd like to focus on our practical operational circumstances and the specific measures we're implementing to tackle current predicaments." Uncle Richard fidgeted in his chair as my first slide materialized. A frank, unadorned analysis of our financial status appeared on screen. "Take note," I proceeded, "Hartwell Industries has faced substantial cash flow problems over the past 18 months, majorly due to three key factors: overextending into untested markets, escalating material costs resulting from supplier modifications, and considerable overhead increases." The Redwood team leaned in, showing obvious appreciation for this change from the glossy narrative they had heard so far. Vanessa gave me a subtle nod of approval. "Moving forward, our main business continues to show strength. Our primary manufacturing divisions are functioning at 92% efficiency with low defect rates. Scores for customer satisfaction in our established product lines stay above the industry standard. The base is firm." For the next 20 minutes, I went over my analysis, acknowledging our flaws but focusing on our advantages, offering concrete data instead of hollow pledges. I concluded with my restructuring plan, a meticulous outline to restore profitability within 3 quarters. Upon completion, there was a moment of quiet. Uncle Richard seemed taken aback, not anticipating such an in-depth presentation. Jeremy was frowning at his notebook. The Redwood team was exchanging looks, evidently revising their expectations. "Thank you, Amanda," Vanessa said eventually. "That was remarkably useful." She then turned to Uncle Richard. "Mr. Hartwell, given Ms. Johnson's presentation, it seems prudent to consider her restructuring proposal. It seems your company has been failing to meet its quarterly goals for a while, correct?" Uncle Richard coughed before replying. "In certain sectors, yes, but," I interjected softly, stating that we've missed targets for 2 consecutive quarters, and projections suggest we will miss the current one as well. The room fell silent. Uncle Richard looked at me, his expression shifting from bewilderment to suspicion. "That's right," a new voice echoed from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Kate standing there, holding a file. She revealed the preliminary figures for this quarter. "We are 27% below our target." Confidently, she placed copies of her report in front of each Redwood representative. "The marketing team has collected customer feedback and market analysis that supports Amanda's evaluation. Our main business is robust, but recent strategic choices have brought about considerable instability," Kate added. Uncle Richard's face turned a deep red. "Kate, this gathering pertains to crucial staff," she completed for him. "Yes, I remember that classification from a few days ago, as marketing. Director, I felt these points were vital for the deliberation." I almost applauded her for her flawless intervention at that moment. Instead, I maintained an unreadable countenance as she seated herself next to me. Vanessa Liu appraised us both for a spell, then directed her gaze towards the senior man at the far end of the table, evidently the Redwood representative. He subtly nodded. "Mr. Hartwell," Vanessa said, turning back to my uncle. Given this data, I believe it's opportune we discusses the real intent of our presence. Redwood Capital is ready to propose an offer for Hartwell Industries acquisition. Uncle Richard's facial expression transitioned from wrath to astonishment. Acquire, but I assumed. We have been tracking your company's progress for a while, she added. We think that with strong leadership and suitable funding, Hartwell Industries might regain profitability and substantially increase its market share. This piqued Jeremy's curiosity. What kind of proposal are we discussing? Vanessa moved folders towards him on the table. All the specifics are within. We're ready to proceed swiftly, with thorough investigations starting immediately, and the deal expected to close in 60 days. Uncle Richard carefully opened the folders, looking surprised as he examined the figures. This is considerable. Correct, Vanessa confirmed. However, it's important to mention that our valuation hinges on the implementation of Ms. Hartwell's restructuring plan. In the absence of those operational changes, the offer would be significantly less. Uncle Richard glanced back and forth between us, his mind seemingly processing the intricacies involved. Vanessa added, any acquisition would necessitate approval from all significant shareholders, such as Monarch Investments. This was the moment I'd been anticipating. Regarding Monarch Investments, I stated, my voice even despite my pounding heart. There's something the EI board should be aware of. Uncle Richard furrowed his brow. Amanda, there's no need to. I am Monarch Investments. The room fell silent for a moment as everyone processed this revelation. Uncle Richard stared at me, first in understanding and then disbelief. That can't be true, he eventually said. Monarch has invested millions. You don't have that kind of money. I responded calmly, I do. My inheritance from my grandfather, along with some smart investments on my part, created Monarch Investments to support Hartwell Industries. When I realized the financial predicament, Jeremy chuckled skeptically. This is preposterous. She's fabricating this to appear significant, Kate countered. For months, I've harbored suspicions. The sequencing of the investments, the precise knowledge of our monetary requirements, everything suggested an informant. Uncle Richard shook his head, still in thought. But why the discretion? Why not simply declare your intention to invest? I inquired softly. Would you have accepted my funds if I had? Or would you perceive it as a threat to your power? Another instance of perhaps the incorrect sibling holding authority. His lack of response served as an answer. Whether you accept this or not, I continued, is immaterial. The papers establish my control over Monarch Investments. And as Vanessa has pointed out, Monarch's convertible notes entail specific performance conditions, requirements that Hartwell Industries have failed to meet for 2 straight quarters, with a third failure imminent. I pulled out a document from my folder and pushed it towards him. I am informing you of my plan to transform Monarch's debt into equity, which takes effect now. As per our previously agreed terms, this grants me a controlling 53% stake in Hartwell Industries. Uncle Richard swiftly grabbed the document, scrutinizing it intensely. This can't be lawful. You misled us. Established a sham company. Vanessa interjected, in truth, Ms. Hartwell's actions, though unconventional, seem entirely legal. The convertible note agreements were duly executed by all parties. Unfortunately, your failure to investigate Monarch's ownership doesn't render the agreements null and void. For the first time, a senior Redwood executive spoke up. Richard, it might be wise to take a brief pause. This recent turn of events undeniably calls for a private discussion with your family. Uncle Richard stiffened, rising from his seat. Yes, 15 minutes. He looked at me, his gaze a blend of anger and bewilderment. In my office now? As the room cleared, Kate squeezed my arm and asked, You all right? I nodded, acknowledging her question. For months, I've been readying myself for this moment, she queried. Need backup? I declined, stating, This conversation requires a one-on-one between you and me. Upon entering his office, Uncle Richard appeared tense, filling the room with an air of apprehension. As the door shut, he turned to confront me. How could you do this? He scolded, implying I had deceived him. I responded calmly, It wasn't my preferred option, explaining that I had tried addressing the company issues directly, proposed solutions through proper channels, and voiced my concerns only for them to be dismissed. Furthermore, I was excluded from meetings and faced undermining by my own team under his leadership. As a result, was this act retaliation? Humiliating me in front of potential investors, orchestrating a coup? This isn't retribution, Uncle Richard, I clarified. It's a rescue operation. Stepping nearer, I looked him straight in the eye. Hartwell Industries is faltering under your management. Your issues aren't rooted in insufficient intelligence or business skills. but rather in your tendency to base decisions on personal pride instead of facts. You've been trying, yet you've put the legacy at stake unintentionally. This stung him. That's unfair, he protested. Isn't it? I retorted. You promoted an unqualified Jeremy. You poured millions into pet projects while letting our fundamental business foundations erode. Instead of surrounding yourself with truth tellers, you've been ensconced in sycophants who cater to your whims rather than enlightening you. And you think you can do better? He retorted angrily, his voice escalating. You've never had to confront the tough choices or shoulder the entire burden of leadership. I defended myself. I've been making those difficult decisions for over a year now. Every time Monarch granted more funding, I was considering risks, examining repercussions, and planning for possible outcomes. The only difference is I carried them out. Relying on truth, not panic. He turned away, gazing out the window at the factory below. Your father wouldn't have made this choice. He would have found another solution. He didn't need to, I whispered, because grandfather valued his knowledge and heeded his guidance. You never accorded me the same recognition. Uncle Richard's shoulders drooped slightly, a hint that my words might be getting through his defensive barrier. What's next? He inquired softly. Do you dismiss me? Remove my name from the company? It's your call, I replied, joining him by the window. I don't wish to lead Hartwell Industries single-handedly. I require seasoned executives who grasp the industry and possess connections with clients and vendors. He cast a sidelong glance at me, not as CEO. No, I conceded. Instead of serving as CEO, maybe you could assume the role of President of Client Relations, concentrating on what you excel at, fostering and nurturing the personal relationships crucial to our achievements. Visible pride clashed with pragmatism within him. As for Jeremy, that's open for negotiation. If he's willing to prove himself instead of assuming his position as an entitlement, there could be a space for him. However, no more fabricated vice presidencies or self-indulgent projects. He fell silent, considering this significant transformation in his world. I remained patient, allowing him time to ponder this upheaval. Lastly, regarding the Redwood proposal, I'm not keen on selling, but I am interested in a strategic alliance that could bring capital for focused growth once we've stabilized. This is something we can delve into together, if you choose collaboration over conflict. He turned to scrutinize me more closely, examining me with fresh perspective. I remained unyielding under his examination, neither provoking nor yielding. Indeed, you are John's granddaughter, he concluded at last. A trace of grudging admiration in his tone. He would have lauded the tactic, not the tactics. It wasn't acceptance per se, but it was recognition, a starting point for potential progress. We should depart, I suggested, glancing at my watch. Others are anticipating us. He nodded, adjusting his tie with his customary motion. However, for clarity, this conversation is not concluded. I will be consulting my own lawyers regarding these convertible notes and the lawfulness of your tactics. I wouldn't expect any less, I responded. It was within his rights to scrutinize the validity of my claim, although I had complete trust in Sophia's legal expertise. Upon our return to the conference room, the atmosphere was tense. The Redwood team sat on one side of the table, their faces impassive professionally. Kate and Jeremy looked at me as I arrived, both showing anticipation. Thank you for your understanding, I began, settling down. Considering the recent happenings within the last hour, I'd like to clarify Hartwell Industries' stance on Redwood Capital's acquisition proposal. I turned towards Vanessa Liu. Though we value your interest and the detail of your proposition, Hartwell Industries is not up for sale at the moment. Vanessa kept her face impassive. I presume you're representing Monarch Investments, now the dominant shareholder? Affirmative, I replied. But we are open to exploring a more restricted strategic alliance that might offer growth funds in particular sectors, while Hartwell Industries retains its independence. The top Redwood executive leaned forward. Ms. Hartwell, our research indicates that your company needs a substantial capital injection to tackle current issues. We'd hesitate to make such a large investment without a complete acquisition. I acknowledge your reservations. However, Monarch Investments, or I, am prepared to offer bridge funding to ensure stability and execute the restructuring plan presented earlier. Once we reach profitability again, we can discuss partnership structures from a position of strength rather than urgency. Uncle Richard coughed. The ownership issue might still require clarification. I back up Amanda's stance on the Redwood proposal. Hartwell Industries is deeply rooted in our community, and maintaining independence is crucial. I glanced at him, taken aback but appreciative for the display of unity. Albeit tentative, Vanessa and her team looked at each other, adjusting their strategies. After a hushed discussion, she faced us again. We understand your choice, but appreciate it. We'll proceed accordingly. Our interest persists. We'll keep an eye on Hartwell's progress, and should events shift, perhaps we can re-enter talks. I nodded in agreement. Thank you for your understanding. As the meeting ended and the Redwood group collected their belongings to leave, Vanessa drew me aside. Clever tactics, she whispered. I must confess, I'm intrigued. There's one thing I can't help but wonder. Was the revelation premeditated, or a response to our presence? Let's put it this way. I adjusted to evolving circumstances. I replied with a subtle smile. She gave an approving nod. By the way, your strategic mindset would be valuable for Redwood. It's a compliment. But for now, my commitment is here. At least for the time being, she conceded. However, business environments evolve. When you seek a fresh challenge, reach out to me. She handed me a new card, with her direct number written on the reverse side. Following the departure of the Redwood delegation, an uncomfortable quiet ensued among the Hartwell family members. It was Jeremy who broke the silence, exclaiming, "This is ridiculous," as he slammed his pen on the table. You can't just barge in and take control based on a minor legal technicality in a funding contract, Dad. Goodbye, Uncle. Richard let out a long sigh. It's not that straightforward, Jeremy, he said. If her documents are valid, as I believe they are, then legally, Amanda now runs the company. So we just give up? Let her take what grandfather built? Everything you've strived for? Everything I've strived for? I echoed, unable to suppress my anger. Jeremy, what exactly have you contributed to Hartwell Industries? Your product development project is massively over budget with no tangible results. You regularly miss meetings and use company funds for client entertainment that never involves actual clients. Jeremy's face turned red. The project you're working on lacks merit, I interjected firmly. It's been inadequately developed and we can't sustain its funding any longer. To maintain your position here, you'll need to assume a genuine role with tangible outputs and responsibility. Your father looked hopeful, but Uncle Richard merely shook his head. She's correct, boy, he said. The project is unsustainable. Jeremy stood up suddenly, causing his chair to screech against the floor. This is all nonsense. Every bit of it. You'll hear from my lawyers soon enough. He left in a huff, slamming the door shut. Kate winced. I guess that went as poorly as expected, she said. Uncle Richard intervened, though he seemed unconvinced once he grasped the situation. Take it easy, he said. Initially, I had my doubts about Jeremy. He hadn't encountered real repercussions for his errors before, but that can wait for another time. Currently, we must tackle the swift shift in leadership. I suggested an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning to formalize these changes and initiate the restructuring process. Uncle Richard gave a slow nod, indicating his understanding. He warned me that some board members were longtime associates of his, who might find this change challenging. I acknowledged my readiness for such resistance. Addressing him, I expressed hope for his backing, at least in principle, as we all share the goal of Hartwell Industries' success. Despite our personal disparities, he studied me for a while before nodding again. He promised support in the boardroom, but emphasized that he would meticulously examine the legal aspects of the situation. I confirmed my expectation for such diligence as he departed to initiate discussions. Kate then moved to sit next to me. So, she expressed with a hint of a smile, CEO Amanda Hartwell sounds fitting. I released a breath I hadn't noticed I was holding. It still feels unreal, though. Yes, it is, she affirmed. And judging by Dad's expression, he agrees too. She slightly tilted her head, examining me. You know, a part of me should be upset about this. You've essentially demoted my father and likely ended my brother's career at Hartwell. But in truth, I'm just grateful. Grateful? She questioned. The company was struggling, Amanda. Everyone could see it except Dad and Jeremy. You took necessary actions. She pondered for a moment, then asked, by the way, what happens to my role in all of this? The question caught me off guard, but an answer sprang to mind. You remain right where you are. If that's your choice, you're good at your job, Kate. Your marketing strategies have been among our few successes lately. She relaxed and smiled upon hearing this. Good. Because I have a lot of ideas. Many of them. You hadn't been sharing your ideas because Dad wasn't paying attention, but now I'm here, and I'll need your assistance with the transition. The employees trust you, and your visible support will ease this process for everyone. Kate nodded gravely, her face serious. She reminded me of something my grandfather used to say, that a true leader is not defined by their actions in easy times, but by the choices they make when there are no good options. I believe he'd be proud of you today. Her words resonated more strongly than anticipated. Although the focus had been on planning and strategic moves, a silent undertow drove me. The need to uphold my grandfather's legacy, to prove worthy of his faith in me. Thank you, I replied humbly as she left for her department, taking a moment in the conference room to reflect on the magnitude of what had transpired. Over mere hours, my status shifted from family outcast to majority shareholder and interim CEO at Hartwell Industries. The true grind was just starting. I harbored a reorganization blueprint to execute, a skeptical board to sway, workforce to reassure, and if attainable, fractured family bonds to mend. Yet for the first time in over a year, I nurtured a flicker of optimism regarding the firm's destiny. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. How did things go? I replied, I'm now the CEO, more info later. Her prompt response arrived. Let's grab drinks tonight. You're treating, boss lady. I grinned, stashing my phone away. Celebration could wait. At present, there was a company to revive. As the day wore on, the hours whizzed by in a frenzy of conferences, calls, and preparations. The news that something momentous had transpired rippled swiftly through the corporation, though the specifics remained undisclosed until the formal board announcement. Met with Frank Coleman and other department heads, informing them about the situation and seeking their backing for the transition. By 6, completely drained but still buzzing from the day's happenings, I got ready to meet Sophia as promised, when a soft knock interrupted. Enter, I called, assuming it was Kate or Frank with additional queries. Instead, my father appeared. Dad? I questioned, taken aback. Why are you here? My father, still limping slightly from the stroke, walked in slowly, but his eyes were sharp and alert. Kate phoned me, informed me of today's events. He sat down carefully opposite my desk, indicating he wanted to hear details directly from me. I hesitated, uncertain about how much he knew or his feelings toward my actions. It's complex, he smiled faintly, suggesting he was aware. My daughter covertly funding our family business and later orchestrating a takeover when Richard attempted to force her out. That seems intricate, doesn't it? There was no criticism in his voice, merely a hint of potential respect. Are you upset? I questioned, seeking clarity. He pondered the question deeply. No, not angry, but definitely shocked. Somewhat saddened that it escalated to this point. His gaze wandered around my office, finally resting on the family photo on my desk. However, what I feel most is pride in you, Amanda. A wave of relief swept over me. You are? She identified a problem, and rather than whining or departing, she devised a solution. Not an easy or flawless solution, but a way forward when all other possibilities had been depleted. He leaned closer, his eyes fixed on mine. That's what leaders do. Uncle Richard doesn't share this view, I noted. He believes I betrayed the family. Dad sighed. Richard has often mistaken loyalty for consent. He insists on being obeyed without question, regardless of the destination. He nodded, acknowledging this was a point of contention between us even before my stroke. This revelation took me by surprise. Previously, my father and uncle had always appeared to be in agreement publicly, concealing their disagreements. I wasn't aware, I conceded. We aimed to shield our conflicts from the younger generation, he explained. Perhaps we erred in doing so. Had you witnessed how we resolved our differences, perhaps you wouldn't have felt compelled to establish clandestine monarch investments. This thought crossed my mind. Would you have acted differently if you were in my position? He pondered for a moment. I might have attempted another direct confrontation with Richard before resorting to the monarch strategy, but then I'm his brother, not his niece. The circumstances are distinct. He offered a melancholic smile. To be honest, I don't think I would have had your ingenuity or bravery. This was unexpected. My father had always set the bar for business wisdom and ethics. It was startling to hear him hint that my methods could have necessitated traits he himself might have lacked. What transpires next? He inquired, mirroring Uncle Richard's earlier query. Tomorrow we convene an emergency board meeting to sanction the succession. Then we enforce the restructuring strategy, emphasizing our core business, discarding the unprofitable expansions, reinforcing our financial reserves. I hesitated before continuing. I extended an invitation to Uncle Richard as president of client relations. I'm hopeful he will accept. My father gave a contemplative nod. Intelligent. Richard has always excelled with people and struggled with numbers. This plays to his strengths while limiting his financial decision-making abilities. Do you believe he will accept it? In time. His self-respect is currently hurt, but Richard is pragmatic at heart. He understands the company needs him, and he needs the company. The matter is deeply intertwined with his self-image, making a full departure unlikely for him. In my preoccupation with operational facets of the transition, I might have undervalued its psychological effect on my uncle. What about Jeremy? Dad inquired. I sighed. It's intricate. He lacks Richard's expertise and connections to rely on. I offered him a legitimate role with explicit requirements, but I'm uncertain if he'll accept the downgrade and responsibility. He might exceed your expectations, Dad suggested, though his tone didn't exude certainty. Occasionally, individuals respond to the standards set for them. Richard never had high expectations for Jeremy, hence he never had to rise. I hope you're correct, I replied, although in my mind Jeremy was more likely to storm off than adapt to the new standards. Dad glanced at his watch and initiated the cautious process of standing up. I guess I should depart. Kate mentioned you have dinner plans. Just drinks with my attorney, I said, rising to assist him. There's no time to waste if you wish to join us. I believe you would find Sophia appealing. He smiled but declined, explaining that his mother was waiting for him for dinner, and she gets anxious when he's late. We walked toward his car at his slow pace. As we reached the vehicle, he turned serious again. Permit me a piece of advice from someone who has made mistakes while running this company. Of course, I replied. Never let today's victories make you arrogant about tomorrow's challenges. The real challenge isn't gaining control, but using that control wisely over time. It's about making decisions that balance immediate needs with long-term goals. Treating people with respect even when they disappoint. I acknowledged his words, understanding their wisdom. I will keep that in mind. He gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. Your grandfather saw the balance in you, a sharp intellect and a kind heart. He didn't verbally explain it to me, but he showed me through his actions. He bequeathed the inheritance directly, not through the company structure. I never realized, I murmured, but he didn't need to. Every time he took you through the factory, introduced you to the workers, explained how each process connected, he was imparting the education he believed a future leader required. My father smiled at the recollection. He was preparing you, Amanda. I feel a pang of regret that my grandfather isn't here to witness this day. Would he have approved of your approach, or would he have been disheartened by the family strife his actions instigated? As if sensing my thoughts, Dad continued, John Hartwell was practical, Amanda. He built this company through resilience and strategic thought, not emotional attachments. He would have comprehended your decisions and reasoning. With this comforting thought, I assisted him into the car and watched as he slowly drove away. I faced the Hartwell Industries structure once more, its windows illuminated by the soft evening light. The ensuing day held fresh hurdles: a board meeting, a company-wide declaration, and the initiation of restructuring efforts. Overcoming resistance, repairing relationships, earning trust were tasks ahead. Yet tonight, I indulged in the contentment of safeguarding what truly mattered. Not just a family concern, but a community, a heritage, a tomorrow. The unassuming investor had found her voice, and Hartwell Industries would be reinforced by it. As morning sunlight streamed through the blinds of our boardroom, I organized my materials on the table, 45 minutes before the emergency board meeting was due to commence. This quiet time was for solace, preparation, as I braced myself for what promised to be a demanding discussion. The polished mahogany table gleamed under the ceiling lights, its expanse scarred just slightly by a thin scratch near one end. A relic from my grandfather's moment of anger during product development meetings when he slammed down an imperfect prototype in frustration. He kept this mark, he told me once, as a symbol that perfection was unattainable, but excellence was within reach. I traced the smooth wood with my fingers, finding solace in the bond to him, to the legacy I was striving to maintain. The door creaked open, disturbing my thoughts. I guessed you'd be here early, Frank Coleman said, placing 2 coffee cups on the table. Knew you could use a jolt of caffeine. Big day ahead. I gratefully accepted the cup. Thanks, Frank. Slept poorly. Appropriate. He sat down in my father's old chair to my right. The board has numerous questions coming your way. I am ready, I replied, though the butterflies in my stomach hinted otherwise. Frank nodded, eyeing me over his cup. In 1989, your grandfather experienced a board rebellion due to excessive debt accrued during the expansion into Michigan. 3 members suggested selling the company to interstate manufacturing. However, this was news to you. With a weathered expression, Frank shared the story of how he presented comprehensive financial projections, demonstrating the turnaround in just 18 months. He even put his house as collateral for an emergency loan and gambled on himself, challenging them with his audacity. The question was, did it work? We're still here, aren't we? Frank added, emphasizing the point that the board respected daringness combined with competence. And this one would too if shown both. As Kate entered, immaculately dressed and carrying her own materials, she greeted, "Good morning, team." though the tension around her eyes hinted at stress. Are you prepared for the change? I'd rather call it an adjustment course, I said. Taking a sip of my coffee, she shrugged nonchalantly, finding her seat. It seems Dad spent part of last night discussing with board members, though I didn't catch all the details, but it sounded like he was preparing them instead of stirring up conflict. That was an unexpected yet positive development. Have you seen Jeremy this morning? Kate asked. His car wasn't in the parking lot when I arrived. Probably recovering from a hangover at some expensive spot, I speculated. Frank coughed delicately to change the subject. I should touch base with manufacturing before the meeting, as they've been getting queries from workers. No specific updates yet, but people sense something is brewing, I shared. Inform them a company-wide announcement will be made this afternoon, I advised. Stress that there are no immediate staffing or production alterations planned. We aim to lessen disruption and apprehension. As Frank departed, Kate moved nearer. CEO Hartwell, what's the strategy? I presented my binder with the presentation inside. First, validate the legality of the Monarch conversion. Sophia will handle that. Kate nodded in agreement. Then, unveil the true financial state without causing panic. Afterward, propose a restructuring plan, focusing on fortifying our core business rather than significant reductions. Highlight continuity whenever feasible. As for the leadership transition, I hesitated, as this was the most delicate part. I'll suggest a new executive structure, with me as CEO, Uncle Richard as President of Client Relations, and you remaining Marketing Director with extended duties. Other roles will be filled based on performance and dedication to our new course. Kate cocked her head. You're giving Dad a substantial role, not just a symbolic title. I replied, we need him. His client relationships are essential. Burning family ties achieves nothing. She found it graceful of you to win. However, I wouldn't have reacted so kindly if I were dismissed from a meeting and treated like an intern. I recalled my father's words from last night. The difficult part isn't gaining power. It's using that power wisely. This situation isn't about winning or losing. It's about saving the company. Before you could reply, Sophia entered with her legal assistant, looking both professional and intimidating in a charcoal suit, carrying a briefcase likely worth more than my monthly mortgage payment. Amanda, she acknowledged me with a nod. The board secretary informed me that all members will be present, either physically or via call, full attendance. Good, I replied, though my apprehension grew further. A full attendance means increased scrutiny. Sophia positioned herself at the side table, organizing legal documents with expertise. I have examined your presentation. The financial information is convincing, but keep in mind that some of these board members have been acquainted with your uncle for many years. Reason may not be sufficient to persuade them. You need to appeal to their emotions as well. How can this be achieved when I'm essentially testifying against their friend? By reminding them about what's more than just figures, such as the company's reputation, community influence, and family heritage. In 10 minutes, they will begin arriving. Are you prepared? I nodded with newfound confidence. Prepared. The following half an hour was a haze of handshakes, introductions, and cautiously neutral chatter as board members trickled in. Most were familiar from past meetings or company events, though I had never addressed them as a group without Uncle Richard leading the discussions. Albert Chen, our longest-serving board member, and my grandfather's former lawyer, scrutinized me with open curiosity. Margaret Wilson, who headed the Regional Banking Association, offered me an encouraging smile. Howard Palmer, owner of 3 manufacturing firms, curtly acknowledged as he settled down. At precisely 8 a.m., Uncle Richard arrived accompanied by Jeremy. My cousin presented a somber demeanor, his typical bravado replaced with taut anxiety. Uncle Richard seemed composed but worn, the fatigue from the previous day visible in the dark circles under his eyes. Good morning, everyone, I initiated once they were settled. I appreciate your promptness in response to this unscheduled meeting. The purpose of today's gathering, as outlined in the notice, is to discuss substantial alterations in Hartwell Industries' ownership and management structure. I indicated Sophia. I requested Ms. Bennett to kick off with a legal summary of the situation. Sophia gracefully stood up, handing out documents to each board member. Good day, I'm Sophia Bennett, serving as external counsel for Amanda Hartwell, in her role as the owner of Monarch Investments. I outlined Monarch's relationship with Hartwell Industries, the specifics of the convertible notes, and how the company fell short of the performance metrics that activated the conversion clause. To summarize, yesterday Monarch Investments converted its debt into equity, granting it a 53% ownership stake in Hartwell Industries, making Ms. Hartwell, as Monarch's sole proprietor, the major shareholder. Albert Chen was the first to speak, looking over his glasses. Ms. Bennett, though the paperwork seems comprehensive, the board wasn't informed that Ms. Hartwell was linked to Monarch Investments. This has sparked doubts about disclosure and potential conflicts of interest. Sophia acknowledged this with a nod. It's a valid concern, Mr. Chen, she replied. Jeremy said, Chen? But corporate law and Hartwell's bylaws do not compel disclosure of an external investor's beneficial ownership unless explicitly asked during due diligence, which didn't happen when the convertible notes were established. We had no grounds to suspect our own kin was clandestinely planning a takeover, Jeremy stated, his tone filled with anger. No, not a takeover, a rescue, I clarified forcefully. Howard Palmer coughed. Ms. Hartwell, though the legal technicalities may be solid, this strategy appears unduly adversarial. Why not just propose your investment openly, with clear terms? I looked at him squarely. Mr. Palmer, after my father had a stroke 18 months ago, the power structure at Hartwell Industries shifted drastically. My proposals were more often disregarded. My influence was eroded. In the end, I was omitted from crucial gatherings despite my position as operations director. I pointed to the fiscal reports in their folders. At around the same time, the company started implementing choices that jeopardized its financial health. Had I proposed investment to my uncle privately, I think it would have been turned down solely due to my identity as the proposer. Margaret Wilson pondered. Richard, do you agree with this evaluation? All gazes shifted towards my uncle. The room grew still as he deliberated his answer. Perhaps I was, unresponsive to Amanda's ideas during that phase, he conceded. Indeed, in hindsight, it was a lapse in judgment. Jeremy stared at his father in astonishment. You're genuinely admitting this? He challenged. Uncle Richard. He was cut off by a look before continuing. Nonetheless, I argue that establishing a covert investment instrument was an excessive action that has eroded trust within the family and possibly within this corporation. In response, I argued, the erosion of trust commenced when competence was disregarded in favor of familial hierarchy, when data-supported suggestions were disregarded, when the company my grandfather constructed began to crumble because unpalatable truths were shunned. I flipped open my binder to the current financial statements, thereby bringing us to our present circumstance. Hartwell Industries now stands at a crucial crossroads. We can persist on our current trajectory, which the figures undeniably indicate is untenable. Alternatively, we can undertake a strategic reorganization to safeguard our future. Over the next 40 minutes, I guided the board through an extensive examination of our financial situation, operational difficulties, and market prospects. I didn't shy away from acknowledging our challenges, but I also accentuated our key assets, our talented workforce, manufacturing proficiency, and reputation for quality. Upon presenting my restructuring idea, a period of thoughtful silence ensued. The board members were clearly examining the details, evaluating possibilities, pondering consequences. Albert Chen took off his glasses to clean them methodically. This plan is thorough, Ms. Hartwell, but it necessitates robust and steady leadership, he said. He glanced repeatedly at Uncle Richard and me. The dilemma before this board is whether the company can operate smoothly under such a complex family arrangement and management. I seized the opportunity that presented itself then. Indeed, Mr. Chen, I concur fully. Hence, I propose a new executive structure that capitalizes on our respective strengths while clarifying lines of command. I unveiled the organizational chart I'd carefully crafted. The position of CEO will be mine, encompassing the strategic planning and management of company operations. Richard takes on the role of President for Client Relations, focusing primarily on nurturing and expanding customer relationships, an area in which his proficiency is undeniable. Upon hearing this recognition, Uncle Richard subtly raised his eyebrows. Kate will retain her position as Marketing Director, with additional tasks in brand development. Frank Coleman will ascend to the role of Chief Operating Officer, supervising daily manufacturing operations. You, Jeremy, were left questioning your place after noticing your position was missing from the organizational diagram. I met your gaze directly and stated, your skills, Jeremy, are distinct. However, they have not been fully utilized in your current role. I would like to explore potential positions that better coincide with your genuine interests and capabilities instead of forcing you into a role that doesn't suit. In response, you said sarcastically, that's corporate speak for you're fired. The CEO role is mine, responsible for company strategy and operations. Richard becomes President for Client Relations, focusing on customer relationships, his area of expertise. Kate remains Marketing Director with brand development added to her duties. Frank Coleman is promoted to Chief Operating Officer for daily manufacturing operations. Jeremy questions his position when he sees it's not listed. I suggest discussing new positions that align better with his abilities and interests instead of forcing him into an ill-fitting role. He responds sarcastically, saying, "That's like corporate speak for you're fired." I made it clear no one is getting fired, I stated. Instead, I'm suggesting a reallocation of duties based on proven abilities and corporate requirements. Margaret Wilson leaned closer. "Richard, what do you think about this proposed setup?" The room turned its gaze to my uncle once more. He scrutinized the organizational chart for a while before speaking up. "It has value," he conceded hesitantly. "Amanda's analysis of our financial predicament is correct, though it's unsettling. Her restructuring plan tackles the essential issues without resorting to major redundancies or liquidation of assets." His gaze shifted to me, a hint of admiration glinting in his eyes. "Though I have reservations about the approach of this transformation, I cannot, in good faith, object to a strategy that boosts Hartwell Industries' chances for revival and expansion." A ripple of murmurs swept through the room. Uncle Richard's conditional support held considerable influence over the board members who had long admired his wisdom. Howard Palmer spoke next. "I've been part of numerous leadership transitions on boards, some seamless, others turbulent. What truly determines success isn't the nature of the transition itself, but the clarity of vision and shared purpose that emerges afterwards." He surveyed those at the table. "The proposed plan is solid. The legal aspects are clear. The issue at hand is whether this board trusts Amanda Hartwell to lead this company effectively, regardless of her uncle's involvement." "I have faith in her," a new voice echoed from the doorway. We all turned to see my father standing there, leaning slightly on his cane, but straight-backed and resolute. "Uncle Richard," Uncle Richard expressed surprise in his tone. "We weren't anticipating your presence." "Apparently not," my father responded dryly. He moved slowly towards an empty chair as the board members exchanged polite greetings. "After I've evaluated Amanda's analysis and restructuring plan, I found it comprehensive, practical, and forward-looking. Regarding Hartwell Industries' current predicament, Thomas," Albert Chen interjected with care, "since your stroke, you've been absent from daily operations. In this interval, the company has undergone significant transformations." "Yes," my father acknowledged. With regret, he added, "The numbers don't deceive. The company my father built and Richard and I nurtured is in distress, not due to market fluctuations or external factors, but as a result of decisions made after your departure." Uncle Richard tensed but remained silent. "Amanda recognized the issues early on," my father continued. "She attempted to rectify them through formal procedures. When that proved futile, she devised an alternative solution, utilizing her inheritance to sustain the company and formulate a comprehensive revival strategy." He looked around the table, his gaze firm and commanding despite his physical constraints. We all knew my father. His legacy is at stake here. John Hartwell prioritized outcomes over protocol and substance over appearances. He would have acknowledged Amanda's actions as loyalty to the company's interests, even if it involved defying family authority. The mention of my grandfather's name stirred a noticeable change in the room. Several board members had served under his leadership and held him in great esteem. Margaret Wilson spoke up later. "Thomas raises a strong point. John established this company on practical solutions rather than rigid hierarchy. He would have evaluated this situation based on results, not rules." Howard Palmer concurred with a nod. "I've witnessed numerous family businesses crumble due to prioritizing family peace over business truths. At least Amanda found a way to preserve the company while providing her uncle an honorable future role." The tide was turning. A sense of agreement pervaded the room, with the understanding that while this transformation might be unsettling, the opposite was more detrimental. Albert Chen, always the attorney, presented the situation formally. "We appear to have two issues at hand. First, acknowledging the shift in majority ownership due to the monarch converting debt into equity, and second, approving the proposed executive reorganization." He looked around the table. "If there are no objections, I propose we vote on these matters." Jeremy pushed his chair back forcefully. "This is preposterous. You're simply accepting this takeover without a challenge?" "It's not a takeover, Jeremy," Uncle Richard responded calmly. "It's an acceptance of the current situation. The truth is that Hartwell Industries requires this reorganization to endure, and Amanda's status as majority shareholder holds legal ground, regardless of how it came to pass." Jeremy stared at his father in disbelief. "So that's it? No fight? You're giving up to her?" "Not at all," Uncle Richard clarified, his tone resolute. "I'm prioritizing the company, as your grandfather would have wanted, as Amanda has been doing all along, Though I was too arrogant to notice, Jeremy's face turned a deep red. Without uttering another word, he exited the boardroom forcefully, slamming the door shut behind him. An awkward silence ensued following his departure. I felt a pang of remorse for the growing family divide we were witnessing, despite being steadfast in my beliefs about the right course of action. Maybe we should move forward with the vote, Sophia suggested delicately. The decisions were clear-cut. The board agreed unanimously to the change in ownership structure, with Uncle Richard abstaining. The executive reorganization was passed by a vote of 7-1, with Uncle Richard being the sole vote against it, a gesture symbolizing his need for dignity. At the meeting's end, as board members dispersed with congratulations or words of support, I felt a complex concoction of feelings: relief, validation, anxiety about future challenges, and lingering sadness over the escalated family strife my actions provoked. Uncle Richard approached as I collected my belongings. "Well done," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "Your grandfather would have admired your strategic acumen, though perhaps not your secrecy." "Thank you," I responded, uncertain what else to say. "I meant what I said about your importance moving forward. We do require your client connections and industry expertise," he confirmed, examining me closely. It struck me as peculiar. When you were young, you used to trail behind me in the factory, bombarding me with endless questions. Even then, you yearned to grasp how everything functioned, how all the pieces connected. The recollection startled me. I had overlooked those initial tours with my uncle, preceding my grandfather's focus on my education. "You were constantly tolerant of my questions," I mentioned gently. "Your thirst for knowledge was remarkable." He adjusted his tie, a habitual move that felt like a bulwark against exposure. "I need some time to ponder the presidency role and adapt to everything happening here. I get it." Pausing, he posed the question that appeared to be weighing heavily on him. "For how long have you been orchestrating this?" "I established Monarch Investments upon the company's initial financial crisis," I admitted truthfully. "However, I chose to exercise the conversion clause only when it was evident the company couldn't sustain its existing trajectory. My dismissal from that meeting served as confirmation. My suggestions would never be appreciated under the current power hierarchy." He contemplated this, then gave a single nod. "Reasonable. Fair enough. Discussion on transition specifics will take place tomorrow." With that, he departed, his posture straight, yet the burden of the day evident in his stride. My father arrived next, treading cautiously but with intent. "I'm proud of you," he stated succinctly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Thank you for coming," I responded. "Your presence was impactful. Least I could do." A hint of smile graced his eyes. "Richard will reconsider, you understand. He may be stubborn, but he's not foolish. And he values this company too highly to jeopardize its recovery due to wounded pride." Regarding Jeremy, Dad's expression turned somber. "That's more challenging to foresee. He hasn't faced real repercussions before. This is unfamiliar ground for him." Kate joined us, enthusiasm barely veiled beneath her professional facade. "CEO Hartwell, what's our initial move? I mean beyond the company-wide announcement," she inquired. Considering the question, I replied, "A town hall meeting with all department heads this afternoon. Besides that, we'll hold a general gathering. Leadership should communicate directly about any changes or consistency to the team. Subsequently, one-on-one meetings with essential clients are necessary to reinforce continuity amidst executive reorganization." Dad agreed, emphasizing stability before instigating change. With rumors circulating, I realized the need to compose a company announcement swiftly. Anticipating speculation, it's crucial to address the matter proactively. After Dad and Kate departed to handle their duties, I stayed in the boardroom to gather my thoughts. The morning's triumph felt substantial, yet unfinished. Although the legal fight was concluded, the board was won over, and the restructuring plan was approved. Transforming Hartwell Industries back to profitability would necessitate more than a well-drafted strategy. It would require persistent execution, tough choices, and most crucially, regaining trust among employees, clients, and family members alike. Gathering my supplies, I made my way to what would now be my office, once belonging to my uncle, characterized by its commanding desk and stunning view. As I traversed the administrative district, I encountered Brenda, my uncle's long-term assistant, clearing personal belongings from her desk. "Brenda," I halted, expressing concern. "What are you doing?" She looked up, her countenance cautious. "I presumed you'd require your own assistant." "I was merely preparing to rejoin the general administrative pool." "Why did you jump to that conclusion?" I inquired, genuinely perplexed. "Because I've served as Richard's assistant for 15 years, she retorted, seeming self-evident. However, with the recent changes, I contemplated. I shook my head resolutely. Brenda, your institutional wisdom is inestimable. You know this company, its clients, and its processes better than most. Unless you prefer not to collaborate with me, I'd be grateful if you remained precisely where you are. A wave of relief swept over her visage. Oh, well, Thank you, miss. Your name, I interjected gratefully. Hartwell, I replied with a smile, correcting her as Amanda. I appreciate your professionalism throughout this transition. I know it hasn't been easy. This brief exchange made me think about something I've been pondering since the board meeting. The human factor in our transition is just as crucial as financial and operational aspects. Employees across the company will be concerned about their roles, interpreting every word and action from leadership. Instead of sitting behind my uncle's large desk, I opted to sit at the smaller conference table by the window. Sitting in my uncle's chair felt symbolic and potentially divisive, so I focused on drafting a company-wide announcement that would strike a balance between revealing our challenges and expressing confidence in our future direction. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. Congratulations on becoming CEO Hartwell. The drinks are still on you, but now we're upgrading to champagne. Despite the heavy day, I couldn't help but smile at her text. There's cause for rejoicing later on. Presently, there's a corporation to stabilize, staff to reassure, and a family legacy to uphold. The office phone rang, my inaugural call as CEO. I took a deep breath before picking it up. Amanda Hartwell speaking. Ms. Hartwell, this is James Mercer from First Regional Bank, came the formal voice. I've learned there have been some leadership shifts at Hartwell Industries. News moves swiftly in business circles. Indeed, Mr. Mercer, I've taken on the CEO role as part of a strategic restructuring. I'd welcome discussing how these changes will strengthen our banking relationship. I understand, he replied cautiously. Given our position as your main lender, we have valid concerns about stability during such transitional periods. Thus began a series of conversations where I would need to instill trust, show competence, and prove that Hartwell Industries under my leadership is a reliable business associate. I fully comprehend your situation, I affirmed. Coincidentally, I was intending to contact you this afternoon. May we arrange a meeting where I can present our restructuring blueprint and discuss any particular questions or doubts you may have? During our discussion, Frank Coleman glanced into the office. He signaled me with a thumbs up as he passed by, and I reciprocated with a nod. The initial department meetings had proven successful. Meanwhile, I continued my talk with the banker. By noon, I had prepared the company announcement, scheduled consultations with our top 3 clients for tomorrow, and initiated work on the immediate tasks from my restructuring plan. The excitement from this morning's encounter had transformed into concentrated resolve. Kate entered my office, sandwich and water bottle in hand. I thought you might have forgotten to eat, she commented, placing them on my desk. Thank you, I replied gratefully, recognizing my hunger. How's the marketing situation? She answered, collapsing into a chair. There are numerous client calls, people seeking clarification regarding the leadership shift's impact on their projects. Generally positive so far. It seems your track record of completing tasks has become known outside our premises. That's good to know. I unwrapped my sandwich. Any news about Jeremy? Kate shook her head. His office is empty now, with security confirming he left the building straight after the board meeting and hasn't returned. A twinge of remorse struck me. Despite our disagreements, Jeremy was like family, and I hadn't wanted our relationship to conclude in this manner. He'll calm down eventually, Kate said, noticing my expression. Or he won't. Regardless, it's on him, not you. Although her words didn't entirely ease my worry. Family businesses often confuse professional and personal boundaries, making clean separations difficult. Any updates about your father? I asked next. How is he managing the transition thus far? Kate pondered. Surprisingly well, to be honest. He began his day meeting with crucial clients, assuring them of continuity. I believe having a distinct role with apparent value has facilitated his adaptation to the current situation. This was reassuring news. Uncle Richard's assistance would significantly ease the transition. However, Kate added a note of concern, her face becoming serious. The finance team discovered some inconsistencies in Jeremy's financial records. Cost management project, unmatched expenses from unauthorized vendors, invoices lacking proper documentation. My stomach knotted up. How serious? They are still investigating, but their initial estimate suggests a loss of approximately $300,000. Misused funds? She nodded gravely. It appears so. Dad was unaware. I'm positive about that. He may have granted Jeremy too much autonomy, but he wouldn't have endorsed financial misconduct. The intricate predicament we find ourselves in. If it's true that Jeremy misused company funds, We would have to deal with both legal and financial problems beyond the leadership succession. I ordered, get accounting, conduct a thorough audit of all expenses related to Jeremy's projects. We need to comprehend the full extent before deciding on the next steps. Kate confirmed it was already in progress. As for Amanda, I believe Jeremy didn't act maliciously. He may have been careless and entitled, but not deliberately criminal. His relationship with boundaries has always been fluid. This aligns with my own understanding of my cousin. Jeremy, having grown up with privilege and few repercussions, often blurs ethical lines without intentionally crossing into wrongdoing. Let's wait for the audit results before jumping to conclusions, I suggested. During this interval, we are concentrating on pushing ahead with the reorganization strategy. The afternoon was filled with a whirlwind of meetings, calls, and preparations for the company-wide announcement. At 4 p.m., employees assembled in the main manufacturing area, the core of Hartwell Industries, where raw materials transformed into precision parts due to our skilled workforce's deft hands. Standing on a small platform with Uncle Richard, Kate, and Frank by my side, symbolizing united leadership, I addressed the gathered employees for the first time as CEO. The sea of faces gazing back at me, some inquisitive, some anxious, all focused, underscored the importance of this transformation. Good afternoon, I began, my voice calm despite my jitters. As you may have heard, today signifies a substantial shift for Hartwell Industries. After thorough deliberations by our board of directors, I've been assigned as CEO, part of a strategic reorganization within our leadership team. A buzz spread through the gathering. Despite whispers all day, the formal announcement caused ripples among them. I understand that shifts in leadership may breed uncertainty, I went on. So let me clarify what this entails, and doesn't entail for Hartwell Industries and each of you. I detailed the essential aspects of the restructuring, highlighting the endurance in fundamental operations and production, while acknowledging the financial difficulties we were dealing with and the alterations required to resolve them. Hartwell Industries isn't merely a company, I concluded. It's a community, one that my grandfather founded, that my father and uncle expanded, and that each of you nourish through your talent, commitment, and effort every day. The changes we're instating aren't about obliterating our past, but about safeguarding our future as a united front. After I finished speaking, there was a brief pause before applause started. Initially hesitant, then growing in strength. I cast a glance towards Uncle Richard, who gave a single nod of recognition before moving forward to deliver brief comments, thereby symbolically handing over responsibility and backing the transition. His open show of support, though perhaps hesitant in private, sent a potent message to employees who had long associated him with Hartwell Industries. It was an unexpected yet appreciated gesture. As the crowd dispersed and workers resumed their duties, Frank approached me with a content smile. That went better than anticipated. Attributable to Uncle Richard, I conceded. His endorsement carries weight among the veterans, Frank affirmed, nodding. Richard has always had an aptitude for understanding crowds. He knows unity is crucial for the company at this juncture. He glanced at his watch. Today's production figures seem stable, no decline despite the chaos. Positive, I responded, feeling relieved. Occasionally, shifts in leadership may affect productivity as employees adapt and contemplate potential consequences. Frank spoke up softly. By the way, he said, Melissa from accounting called. The financial irregularities in Jeremy's department are proving to be more severe with each investigation. My brief sense of relief vanished. If estimates hold true, it could exceed $500,000. Furthermore, there seemed to be signs that some suppliers might not be legitimate businesses. Exactly what I had feared. Not simple bookkeeping errors, but potentially fraudulent actions with potential legal consequences for the company. Keep me informed, I directed. And Frank, let's keep this confidential among accounting and Kate. For now, I want a comprehensive understanding before we share it with Uncle Richard or the board. He nodded solemnly. Got it. See you at tomorrow's operations meeting. As the day ended, I was left alone in my new office, lost in thought, looking out the window as employees exited to the parking lot, marking my first day as CEO. The weight of the responsibility I had assumed loomed heavy. Overseeing 300 livelihoods, a multi-generation legacy, and millions in assets and liabilities now lay squarely on my shoulders. The phone on my desk rang again. Brenda was gone, so I picked it up directly. It was Amanda Hartwell. Ms. Hartwell, came a familiar voice. This is Vanessa Liu from Redwood Capital. I heard the board meeting went well for you this morning. News certainly travels quickly in business circles. It did, thank you. However, As I mentioned yesterday, Hartwell Industries is not up for sale. That's clear, she replied smoothly. I'm not calling about an acquisition today. Instead, I wanted to share some information that might be pertinent to your new role. Her tone gave me pause. What kind of information? Your cousin Jeremy contacted Redwood Capital this afternoon regarding a matter that could potentially concern you in your new position. He's exploring a new business concept, one that could confront Hartwell Industries in crucial sectors. This made me sit up attentively. Proceed. He asserts to possess exclusive designs and client connections he cultivated at Hartwell. He's aiming for initial capital to kick off what he labels as a more inventive, forward-thinking counterpart to your organization. This is graver than I'd anticipated. It's not merely misused funds, but potentially pilfered intellectual property and client data as well. Thank you for informing me, I said cautiously. Might I inquire about the reason for this disclosure? It's for you. Out of professional etiquette, she explained. Also, a hint of self-interest. Redwood Capital values prospective alliances with companies that maintain integrity and transparency in operations. Your cousin's methods triggered several warning signs for us. I understand. I paused to think before replying. What did you discuss with Jeremy? I informed him that we would require thorough investigation before we could entertain his proposal, ensuring any intellectual property he claims are indeed his to disclose. Well said. She didn't outright refuse him, but created substantial hurdles instead. Thank you for the details, Ms. Liu. It's quite pertinent to our ongoing internal deliberations. I suspected as much, she answered. And Amanda, congratulations on your new role. Hartwell Industries is indeed lucky to have a leadership that values its long-term sustainability over short-term impressions. That's regrettably uncommon in family businesses. After our call ended, I contemplated this fresh, complex situation. Jeremy wasn't merely storming off. He was strategizing to challenge us with knowledge, designs, and connections amassed at Hartwell Industries. The concurrent financial inconsistencies placed the company in a precarious predicament, potentially threatening its progress at the onset of our recuperation phase. I dialed Sophia's number, as legal matters demanded attention, and the intricate transition I had arranged turned out to be even more convoluted than expected. However, following my grandfather's wisdom, I viewed problems as disguised opportunities cloaked in labor, and was never deterred by effort. The subsequent 6 months were a tumultuous whirlwind of alterations. An audit within Jeremy's department disclosed nearly $780,000 misused funds, necessitating legal action amidst family intricacies. Uncle Richard shocked us all by backing this decision, prioritizing the company's integrity over familial loyalty. Hartwell Industries requires protection, he declared resolutely during the executive meeting where we made this decision. Jeremy countered by threatening to disclose confidential business information to rivals and discussing suspected misconduct in industry media. Despite our legal warnings, his new business, Pinnacle Precision Manufacturing, failed to secure significant investment. Throughout this ordeal, Uncle Richard was instrumental. His extensive network of clients helped maintain our customer base during the transition, and we forged a productive partnership based on mutual esteem for the company's heritage. The board collectively decided to lift the interim status from my CEO title, offering me a permanent contract that endorsed my vision for Hartwell Industries. Albert Chen, my grandfather's former lawyer and our longest-serving board member, conveyed this news personally. Your grandfather always said you had the talent, he said, referring to my ability to consider both the big picture and details to balance short-term requirements with long-term goals. Our restructuring strategy delivered results earlier than anticipated. We managed to secure advantageous terms for our bank loan restructuring, enabling us to proceed smoothly with the transformation process. Subsequently, we achieved the goal we had been striving towards, the Miller contract. With our revamped precision components that were smaller, more efficient, and cost-effective compared to their predecessors, we sealed a significant automotive manufacturing deal, securing long-term growth. Upon hearing this news, I encountered Uncle Richard in the conference room. Congratulations, Amanda, he said sincerely. The redesign was your brainchild from the outset. This recognition primarily belongs to you. It belongs to everyone who believed in Hartwell Industries' potential. I responded, acknowledging his role as well, including you. The groundwork for client relationships allowed this success. As I drove home, I admired the Hartwell Industries sign against the sunset sky and reflected on our journey. My grandfather established the company with core values that still resonate today: integrity, excellence, community. These values must adapt to modern times in our business strategy, but the foundation remains steadfast. Finding a balance between tradition and change was my toughest challenge as CEO, and it will remain so as we face a more competitive market. However, Hartwell Industries now has the ideal team, direction, and leadership to continue thriving for future generations. The silent investor has finally spoken, guiding Hartwell Industries towards a future worthy of its past. Next, you'll find two more compelling stories right on your screen. If it strikes the target, you'll find no reason to ignore them. Simply click for a closer look.